I can't help but think in the current climate about politics. I had a conversation last night about politics. I had a conversation this afternoon about politics. Every time that I turn on the TV, I'm lambasted with politics. Or at least that's what most people would think. See, there's a dichotomy here between governance and politics. The whole goal of having politicians is so that people can represent the larger whole or the larger good and make decisions that represent the goal of those people that they represent, okay? The whole concept is you are sent into the political system to represent the larger body or the political group that you represent. And I can't help but think as I have conversations with people that we as a society have lost sight of what we believe and why we believe it. One of the questions that I asked a friend of mine last night was, what is socialism? Socialism isn't what it's being sold as in the current American political system. It's the desire to promise the same outcome for everyone. I haven't seen that offered. The one place where I have seen it offered is the concept of everyone making the same amount of money, or a base where everybody makes a certain amount of money. But there's a couple things that I wanted to pose to you. Number one, why do you believe what you believe? Okay, there's a couple different reasons, more than likely, that you would tell me that you hold those beliefs. Okay, number one is probably how you were raised. Your parents probably were loyal Republicans or loyal Democrats, and they more than likely raised you in a way to say, boy, this is what we believe and why. And whether or not you even understand it, more than likely, it's something that's foundational to who you are and would change your relationship with your family if you suddenly flip-flop one direction or the other. People are very, very passionate about it. The second one is probably personal experience, and that could involve, I went to college and I had a period of enlightenment or time where I learned about the world and you chose to believe things one way or the other. Or maybe you were convinced that other external ideas were better. Maybe you have decided maybe communism is for you and that makes sense for your view of the world. Maybe you boy, I can't even think of multiple political systems, but there's all variants basically of what democracy is, how we define it in the United States, whether that is a multi-party system or whether that is a two-party system. They're all variants on the same theme. Maybe you have religious convictions that basically define how you view the world. And I think really politics comes down to, how do you view the world, okay? Like, how do you believe certain systems should work to take care of people? Because in reality, that's what governance is, establishing common rules and compromises that we can all get behind and that we can agree to. The other question I have is, are your convictions grounded in reality? Going back to the idea of socialism, people have told me a couple different times, well, Joe Biden is a socialist. Is he? I don't see anywhere where this guy is trying to standardize everyone's wage, trying to standardize what houses we live in, trying to standardize what schools we go to. That's socialism, right? If you know anything, if you've read anything about the writings of Engels or Marx, you understand that that was a rebellion against the landed boy, I can't even talk right now. But there's a bourgeoisie and then there's the proletariat, right? One, the bourgeoisie, that's where the term bougie comes from, are the people who have all the money. The proletariat are the workers, okay? The people, they're the means of production, whereas the bourgeois own the means of production, right? They own the capital, the capitalists. So the idea of capitalism is when we, allow the invisible hand to govern the decisions that people make. But Engels and Marx thought that it would be much better if we could come up with an egalitarian society where everyone was equal, and there wasn't this pursuit of riches. So no, I don't think Joe Biden is a socialist in any way, shape, or form. And there's so many issues too. Are they grounded in reality? Can you tell me what the facts and figures are behind what you believe? And then the other part is, did you get what you believe from a news source, or did you go and find out the reality or veracity of things on your own? That's super important. That's super important, because I just think if you're not a critical thinker, if you're not a person who's going out there looking up facts and figures on your own, and making decisions about what you believe on your own versus a person who watches CNN or watches Fox News or watches MSNBC or the ABC News or watches PBS and just walks away from whatever they say and says, that's the truth. Please, people, be critical thinkers. Be critical of what people tell you, because everyone has an agenda. And not only is there an agenda, there is a narrative that people are trying to weave, okay? And that may have elements of truth in it, and it may even be grounded in elements of truth, but it isn't in and of itself truth. That's the important thing to keep in mind. Another question to ask yourself, what's your non-negotiable? Okay, there are people that will have political conversations one way or the other, and at some point they just have a non-negotiable where they just say, nope, this is one thing I believe. Okay, and belief and facts are not, what's the term? They don't always have to go with one another. You can believe something that is not true. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. You can believe things that are not true. Just because you believe it doesn't mean it's true. You should critically evaluate what your beliefs are and why you believe them, and you should be willing to listen to other people's point of view and what they have to say. Super important. Another thing, I think this is good to keep in mind. Politicians, maybe better yet, all more than likely began with good intentions, okay? But the thing that I want to maybe remind you of is that money and power corrupt people. Okay, it's really hard, and I can't say that I'm not guilty of the same thing. If someone came to me and offered me power, prestige, and money, then I could say, oh, no way, I have my principles. I don't think that until we're placed in that position, and you have to actually make a decision, whether you're willing to take millions of dollars to take on someone's political agenda, I don't think that you can really poo-poo the people that have done that, okay? And that's something that we've fought in politics for as long as politics have existed. The other thing, too, that I think it's good to remember, too, is that those that are in power want to stay in power. And so if there is a movement in politics that will cost one side or the other power and prestige, they're not going to want to compromise, and they're not going to want to give up that power and prestige. And that has to do with people groups, okay? Regardless of where you are in the world, keep in mind that the dominant people group wants to stay in power. There's not an example where I can think of where there's an amicable sharing of power. Okay, often what we find throughout the world is people groups that are willing to kill other people groups in order to stay in power. I think history, if you look at it, you read it critically, is rife with that. Rife with that, meaning there's a lot of it. The other question is, are the politics that we see, okay, on TV, or what politicians are feeding us, does that achieve the goal of governance? And remember that the goal of governance is compromise and the betterment of the whole. I would say probably not right now. Both sides. I'm not talking one way or the other. The other thing too are, what are the economics of government? Meaning, what are the invisible forces that guide the choices of the people that we see in power right now. And these are things that I think people oftentimes forget, is that in order to govern effectively, you have to be willing to work with the other elements of the government. And that oftentimes means compromise. That means working with the other side, which I'd like to see more of. And I'd like to see less vilification of that practice. And then very lastly, how does our current state of affairs fit into the broader context of history and the broader context of politics in the world? Something to think about, okay? Are we the only system that's ever existed like ours currently is? No, I don't think so. There are other different forms of democracy in the world. But I also think that humans are similar. I think our motivations are similar throughout the world, okay? So that's something to look at, how those political systems have adopted and changed over time to bring us to where we are. Just some thoughts for your day. Hope things are going great. Have a good one, guys.